I'm thrilled to welcome Matt Carbonara from Citi Ventures. Hi, Matt. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Jack. Thanks for having me on the program and excited for our discussion.
Hey, we got a chance to see your presentation at the Global Corporate Venturing session. We were regular attendees at those events. It was very impressive. Appreciated hearing your insights. Love to hear a little bit more about your interaction with GCV, and it's just the leadership role they're playing in the corporate venture industry is interesting. So we always like to hear about the experiences with them.
Yeah, we've been involved. I mean, Citi Ventures have been involved in GCV for a long time. I've been going to their events for quite a while as well. They have a great community of CVCs, and it's a great forum for CVCs to compare notes on the state of the market, best practices, how to navigate situations, how to add value to and work with their corporate partners. It's been just a great experience for me. I know, we have some team members. I think Ornette on our team this year was recognized as an emerging leader by GCV. And I've just made great connections, over the years at the GCV events. So it's a great group, and continue to want to be involved there. And I think they really have done a good job of building a community of corporate venture capital investors, and creating a good forum and a good place for that dialogue to take place as people try to tackle the same challenges and figure out best practices.
Matt, I did a little bit of homework on your background going way back to your educational days, recognizing you're an Ohio State Buckeye. Now, I have a business partner, a co-founder at Impact Venture Capital who went to Michigan, and I have a son that goes to USC, and we're headed out to take. I guess Ohio State's coming out to LA in 2024 for a game on USC's campus. There's going to be some rivalries. There might be some side bets going on. How are you feeling about your team over the next year?
Super excited. Go Bucks is all I can say. I mean, I'll always say the first rule of the OSU rivalry is we don't even refer to the other team by name. We just call them the team up north. So that's it's a competitive rivalry. I'm glad that it's become really competitive the last couple of years. So I'm looking forward to this year's game, and it's always exciting. So always a nail biter.
Well, in addition to being a Buckeye, your background includes actually a variety of experiences at a few different corporate venture groups. I think we first interacted when you were at Comcast back in 2016. Then you spent a little bit of time at Cisco, and now at Citi. For those that are sort of getting up to speed and learning about the corporate venture industry, it'd be great to just hear a little bit about your journey, maybe any differences between those corporate venture groups.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll just give a little bit of background to start. Just myself, I was an engineer by training. I was a BS, MS, EE, and started as a chip designer, so sort of on the technical track. But my first job was at a company called Terion Communication Systems, founded by two Israeli brothers here in the Bay Area. And they were building some of the first cable modems in the world. But what was really impactful for me was about a month into that experience, and I think I was like the 11th employee, and maybe by the time this meeting happened, I was the 13th employee. He called us all, Zaki, the CEO, called us all in this conference room, and he passed around this check for $8 million. And I was like, wait, first of all, who believes in us so much they're going to give us $8 million? Secondly, like, who gets to make these decisions, right? Seems like a really interesting role to have this view on an industry and a view on companies and try to figure out which ones are going to be successful and invest in them. And that was kind of like my first inkling, is like, oh, maybe I don't want to be an engineer the rest of my life. Maybe there's some other roles that might be interesting. And so I was able to actually move from engineering to product management and eventually product marketing. And at the end of that experience, I was there 6 years. Company went public. I was lucky enough to get a job at a venture fund. And for me, what led to my break was I was in an area that venture fund had interest in investing in. They wanted to invest in comm systems and silicon were sort of the two emerging areas at the time where there was a lot of white space and a lot of opportunity and growth to come. And so they said, hey, Matt, why don't you come on board with us? You've been at a startup, so you know what it's like to walk in the entrepreneur's shoes. And you've built a comm system and built silicon that goes in comm systems, so you can help us diligence those companies and know like what's realistic and what's not realistic when entrepreneurs come in and pitch to us. So that was kind of my break into venture. From there, I was at one venture fund, and then eventually got into corporate venture at Cisco, and then from there to Comcast, and then to Citi. And what I would say, Jack, is that every platform's a little bit different. They all have their own assets that they can bring to bear and to help startups, and the smart ones lead with those benefits to the companies they're trying to invest in, and really work hard to expose those benefits to the companies that they're investing in, so that they can create some differentiation for themselves in the marketplace. So for example, at a company like Cisco, it's the sales team, right? I mean, Cisco has an awesome, amazing enterprise sales team with 10,000 salespeople that have the ear of the CIOs and CTOs in a lot of the Fortune 2000 companies. And so Cisco leverages its go-to-market to try to help those portfolio companies, as well as some other assets. With Citi, what we leverage is the fact that we're a large enterprise customer, and probably one of the largest in terms of scale, number of countries we operate in, complexity. And so we can help the companies that we invest in really understand how to sell to large enterprises and help them be successful in that. What attracted me to the Citi platform was great team, great people, and a great platform. The scale that I talked about, and then lots of ways for us to add value in addition to Citi being a customer. And we'll talk about these, lots of other ways that Citi can add value to our portfolio companies, whether it's being sort of the bank for the portfolio companies, whether it's being an investment bank when they're ready to go public or get acquired, or whether it's helping in other areas as well.
Well, let's talk a little bit about why Citi got into the corporate venture capital game. My partner and I spun out of Oracle to launch Impact Venture Capital. At Oracle, it was sort of most of the focus was just on M&A. Since then, we've seen corporate venture groups, really lean in to gather market insight and just really understand sort of tailwinds behind different technology trends. Clearly, they're acting as an early, customer, sometimes crowdsourcing, innovation from these startups, maybe ultimately investing and ultimately acquiring businesses. Can you talk a little bit about sort of why Citi initially started actively investing in early stage tech companies?
Yeah, happy to, Jack. Citi Ventures, this incarnation really started in about 2010. So we've now been doing this about 13 years. And it really was set up to sort of bring the outside in, or capture that innovation that's happening in the startup ecosystem and bring that inside of Citi. So it's really sort of a innovation function, and helps us connect more deeply with the innovation ecosystem by being investors in those companies. It's one of a number of different things that we do inside the bank to help drive innovation, but that's really been the focus for us has been, let's bring the outside in, let's connect the Citi team, executives, organizations to the innovation that's happening, not just in Silicon Valley, but around the world, but in the startup ecosystem.
Interesting. So let's now shift to investment selection and sort of deal selection. And the pattern that we're seeing is there's some groups that are operating completely independently and really driven by financial returns. Others are clearly leaning towards strategic value, and then there's a hybrid in the middle. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, as you go through the deal selection process, not only sort of how you weight strategic value versus financial value at Citi, but also sort of how you're interacting with the business units and any BU sponsorship required for making investments. How you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, the answer is both. It's both strategic and financial. I mean, we are a bank, so people want us to be good stewards of Citi's capital, but our real focus is on innovation and helping Citi innovate. The way we've kind of boiled that down is, I guess if I back up, I'd say our remit is to help propel the growth of Citi and of the ecosystem by investing in and partnering with cutting edge companies that are shaping the future of financial services and sort of positively impacting the world. The way I have boiled that down for myself is, we want to invest in things that are strategic to Citi. We only invest in things that are strategic to Citi. We don't require BU sponsorship, but we do get measured on, hey, how many of the companies that you invest in have a relationship with Citi, either a partnership or Citi is a customer of that company. And so the way I thought about that is we should be investing in things that are relevant to Citi and where we're investing in the number one or two company in the space. If we invest in the number one or two company in the space and it's relevant to Citi, investing in the number one or two company, hopefully we're going to drive a good return if we're truly in the number one or two company. The number one or two company usually has the best outcome. Secondly, that's the company that if we're trying to get Citi to innovate faster and become a customer or partner, a customer of or partner with, that's the company that Citi should be partnering with, because the number 1 or 2 company is going to be the biggest company. They're going to have the most revenue. Therefore, they'll have the most money to spend on R&D. Therefore, they'll have the best product roadmap and the best ecosystem around the company. And, it's not easy to get technology into a large enterprise. And so when you do that, you want to make sure it's the number 1 or 2 vendor, because you want to have that relationship be a 10-year relationship, not a 2-year relationship. And then, if you don't invest in the best company, you might find, oh, this innovation roadmap isn't so good. Now I have to go find another vendor. So we look at that overlap of, investing in the number 1 or 2 company as serving both the strategic and the financial aspect for things that are relevant to Citi.
The other thing you mentioned there, in addition to investment return and strategic value, sort of making the world a better place, it's been interesting going to some of the corporate industry conferences and seeing corporate venture groups actually color code their portfolio in line with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and sort of looking at, sort of leaning in on solving some of the world's largest problems. Is that relevant to you guys at Citi? Is that the framework you use to sort of look at, from a deal selection standpoint, how a technology might make the world a better place? How much are you looking at the SDGs?
We spend, Citi Ventures spends less time on that. We have what's called the Citi Impact Fund that was created in 2020 that, that is their focus. I don't know how they operate enough to know if they categorize their companies specifically the way you described, Jack. But, for us, we tend to think of strategic value and financial returns as the 2 main lenses. And then the Impact Fund tends to focus more on the ESG type of elements of investments.
Okay. And from an investment strategy standpoint, we share some industry sector focus. As you'll recall, at Impact Venture Capital, we're looking at artificial intelligence applied to areas like security and finance. We oftentimes do that at the earliest of stages, at the seed stage, with $500,000 to $1 million sort of check size. So that's our focus. Can you elaborate a little bit on the approach you take by industry sector, by stage, and by check size? That'd be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two main practices. One is a fintech practice. So as all the things you think a company like Citibank would care about, that's areas like payments and commerce and lending and prop tech, other areas related to fintech and financial services. And then I lead the enterprise practice, which is the things you think of that a large enterprise like Citi would consume as a customer. And those are things like cybersecurity, cloud, developer tools, customer experience and marketing, data, AI, ML, and now generative AI, automation, HR tech. And we're within those, so that's our 2 main practices. Within those, we're a stage agnostic investor. We don't do a lot of seed and we don't do a lot of pre-product, but we'll invest anywhere from, hey, I have a product and a handful of customers, all the way up to pre-IPO. So that can be Series A to pre-IPO. I'd say the sweet spot for us is probably Series B. Check sizes can range, pretty broadly from, $500K to $10, $20 million. And then from a geography perspective, we have people in Bay Area where I sit. We have people in New York, London, Tel Aviv, and Israel, and then Singapore. And we invest, I'll say, in all those regions, APAC, not China, but the other areas of APAC, Europe, North America, and Israel.
So you're invested. Let's talk a little bit about value add. You invest in a Series B company. It's a competitive term sheet situation, or you're trying to get into the syndicate, and the entrepreneur asks you, "Hey, Matt, how are you guys really going to add value beyond capital? We need to have an active investor base that's really adding value beyond capital." We've seen corporates sort of add market insight. We've seen them be interesting customers. We've seen corporates provide co-development, product development support. Certainly access to channels. Is there anything in particular that Citi does with regard to adding value to the companies they invest in?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jack. And I think it's the most important question for any CVC, or not say any VC operating in any place, to ask themselves. Because look, we all know it's competitive to get into the best opportunities, right? So how do you differentiate yourself and how do you get in? And, for us, it's a couple things. It's Citi as a customer. So, the opportunity to have Citi become a customer. We're a large enterprise, one of the largest. And so when we do become a customer, we tend to be one of your largest customers. As part of that process, we can also help you understand, well, what does it take to sell to the large enterprise? What product features do I have to have? What integrations do I have to have in order to sell to a large enterprise like Citi? So that's sort of number one, is the, Citi as a customer and Citi as a proving ground for selling to large enterprise and other financial services. We also have a tech council of tech execs that are peers of the people that we spend a lot of time with at Citi, at other large enterprises as well, that we can introduce our portfolio companies to, that are also potential customers for them, and where they can get product feedback. We tend to be pretty deep in understanding the different spaces. So we have some thought leadership that we can share with our portfolio companies, because we do spend a lot of time with the leaders inside of Citi, understanding the gaps that they have, where they're trying to take the business, what the technology roadmaps are, and then, what the missing pieces are, right? And so, but we can help articulate those unmet needs to the marketplace, and that can further help the entrepreneurs shape their product, shape their product roadmap, potentially even start a company. So that's a couple of the ways we add value. In addition, Citi has a number of other elements. We're very active putting together events and thought leadership and networking opportunities for entrepreneurs to come together with tech executives and Citi executives. And then within Citi itself, there's other parts of Citi that can add value to these companies. So Citi has a corporate bank, a bank that banks companies, so they could be a customer of that. Citi has a investment bank, so if a company is going to do an M&A or go IPO, Citi could help there as well. So there's sort of a number of areas where Citi can be both a partner, a customer, and vice versa to these companies. So we try to bring all of Citi to bear when we can, to help our portfolio companies.
Well, thanks for that level of detail. I appreciate it, because as a seed investor, we're oftentimes, participating in the seed round of the Series A, and then looking at the key elements of traction to get to a successful Series B and get the company, eventually to cash flow positive. And I can absolutely see Citi's involvement providing a bit of a halo effect for the companies they get involved with, whether it's partnership or proof of concept or some of the other things that you mentioned. So thanks for that level of detail. Let's talk a little bit about, how the world has woken up to the value of artificial intelligence and generative AI. Obviously, ChatGPT taking the world by storm, I think introduced sort of the power of generative AI, and I think made the broader tech community and financial markets understand sort of how AI could, sort of disrupt a variety of spaces. What's your view if you look at AI in the banking space and the financial services space, particularly, I guess, is in your area of sort of enterprise? How do you see this sort of playing out? Where are the disruption or the opportunities as you see it in the banking and financial industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's top of mind for everybody these days, Jack. What I would say, we're still early in understanding the development and where it's going to have an impact on financial services. But I think it's going to be the things that you are hearing about in the press, areas like summarization, areas like simplifying content generation, areas like customer experience and customer interaction, code generation. I think those are the areas that we're exploring. Where it ultimately have impact, I think, is still a little TBD, because I think we have a very high bar for, meeting, I'll say, compliance and regulatory requirements, maybe the most stringent of any customer. So I think those are figuring out how you can deploy it in a way that meets those requirements is important.
Let's talk a little bit about maybe get your advice on the next generation of investors. My partner, Eric Ball, and I both went through the Kauffman Fellows Program, Class 16. We graduated from Class 16, got leadership awards, spun out of Oracle, and launched Impact Venture Capital. That's how we got into the venture industry. Arguably, maybe the hardest and most difficult path into venture is launching a brand new venture capital firm. But persistence has paid off for us. What advice do you have as sort of Kauffman Fellows and others think about the sort of VC networking, hiring process, sort of attributes, characteristics for success in the investment community? Obviously, you've gone through 3 different venture organizations, got an amazing amount of training, and now have been in the industry for quite some time. Can you talk a little bit about any advice that you would have with regard to either the networking aspects or the hiring process or key characteristics for successful venture investors?
Yeah, so I think a couple things. I think one is, and first, congrats on your success in building Impact Venture Partners. That's great to hear, and that's sounds like an awesome journey. What I would say to people is try to pick an area to go deep in and to become an expert on, that you think is going to be a target-rich environment, so that there'll be good deal flow in that area, and hopefully becoming well known for traveling those circles and knowing that space will also help you attract deal flow in that area as well. And that can be sort of a reinforcing function for you. If you become known as somebody that's a thought leader in a space and an expert in a space and sees a lot of deal flow in a space, then you'll probably see more deal flow in that space. And people will seek you out for your advice, and you'll get some good opportunities to invest in companies like that. So I think going deep on a space is one. I think early in your career, I think being really good at networking and sourcing is really important, because that's the time to invest in your network, meeting people, understanding the different funds and how they invest, building network with entrepreneurs, going to conferences. I think all that stuff is really important in terms of trying to cast a wide net, meet a lot of people, and sort of calibrate yourself as to what does a good opportunity look like, and to develop your investment acumen over time. So those are the 2 pieces of advice that I would give to early people, Jack.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, Kaufman talks a lot about it as a personal brand in the industry, right? You're trying to play a thought leadership role and affiliate sort of your name with certain, to your point, industry sectors or stage or sometimes geographies, those kinds of things. That's really helpful. Matt, you mentioned cybersecurity earlier in this discussion, so I wanted to circle back to that for a second. I'm on the board of a company called Kornami in the cybersecurity space. We think it's quite interesting. They've got a market leadership position with regard to fully homomorphic encryption. They're looking at the banking industry and financial services industry. It'd be great to get your candid perspective on sort of the areas within cybersecurity that interest you or that are most relevant to you.
Yeah, so cyber, really important to the bank. As you can imagine, banking trust is like a really important attribute. And so defend the enterprise and the franchise is really important. Within cyber, areas that we've been spending time around are vulnerability management. So the idea of, hey, you have these scanners that tell you the things you need to fix in your infrastructure, in your code, but that list tends to be quite long. So how do you prioritize those things and get down to a shorter, more actionable list? So that's one area. Secondly, software supply chain security has been a big focus for us over the last year, which is to say, when people used to develop software, maybe they would write 80% of it and 20% would come from third parties or open source. But that has really flipped now to where it's 80% open source or third party and 20% the glue logic or maybe the special logic that you're putting together. And so with all this software coming from outside the 4 walls and not being of your premise and not being developed by your own coders, understanding the provenance of that, the vulnerabilities in that, what versions are the best versions to use, or if I have a choice between 2 open source projects, should I pick one versus the other because it's updated more frequently, has less vulnerabilities, the reputation of the maintainer is better. So this whole idea of software supply chain security is an important one. We spent a lot of time around identity. So I think there's sort of a cohort of companies that we saw coming out of RSA and the identity and detection and response space. So monitoring the identities that are interacting with your different assets in the enterprise, looking for the anomalies, the normal behaviors, and the things that are not normal in the behavior, and then helping you understand what happened, and even to some extent, helping you focus on a least privilege access type of approach to what those identities can do. One of the challenges, or one of the ways people are breached today, is that somebody will get somebody's credentials. So they get Matt's credentials, they go in, and then they have access to all the systems that Matt has access to. But if people are to reduce the stuff that I have access to, the minimal that I need, that I really use, don't over provision me, then that attack surface gets a lot smaller, right? So that's another element of what these solutions do. So those are three areas within cyber that we're, quite excited about and actively looking for investments in.
I'm rapidly typing notes here on my end. I hope the keyboard isn't too loud because Kornami and Arnica are two portfolio companies that are in the spaces that you described. One in the cybersecurity space with regard to FHE, and the other in the supply chain management security space. So we'll have to follow up on those separately. Look forward to that. With regard to advice for startups, so you have a startup that's knocking on the door at Citi and they're trying to put their best foot forward. Are there certain qualities, character traits, certain level of traction that you like to see with regard to customers or product development before you engage? What advice do you have for the startups with regard to the timing and the approach when they first knock on Citi's door?
Yeah, good question. And maybe the other thing I'll say, just to talk about areas outside of cyber, is other areas that are top of mind, just to give you a sense. So first is like, be in a strategic area that's important to Citi, right? So cyber is certainly one of those. Other areas that are, I mentioned all the areas that we cover, but other areas that are really top of mind today are developer tools and developer productivity. Maybe not something you would think of Citi for, but we have 35,000 developers, right? And making those people more productive is a big deal. And making their work lives better and making them more efficient is a big deal. So developer tools and developer productivity is a thematic area. New plumbing for building applications, new ways of building applications that are more efficient, effective, and scalable. We look at things related to HR tech. We're spending time there. That's an interesting category for us. And then sales and marketing and customer experience solutions. So those are all sort of strategic areas for us. Within that, we like to see a company that has a product in market and at least a handful of customers. And any time post that is certainly a great time for us to engage with you. You don't have to have already had one, have a financial services customer or have a global 5 bank as a customer. We're happy to try to be that first one. And regardless, we're happy to give you feedback on your product and how that can be best, does it fit what we need, or what would it need to be added to it for it to fit with Citi? And that's where we can really add value to these companies, is understanding the needs of the large enterprise. But it really comes down to being strategically aligned with us, and then being sort of post product where you have a handful of customers. So that, and it also helps us, if you have a product, then we can demo it to people in Citi. We can show it to people, we can get real feedback on it, and it becomes less of an abstract discussion, Jack. That's
helpful. So we talked a little bit about your ideas and advice for startups and entrepreneurs. We talked a little bit about your ideas and advice for new investors. Let's maybe talk a bit about sort of established VC firms like Impact Venture Capital, other Kaufman Fellows that are on the line or that will be watching this. How are you, collaborating with existing seed and early stage VCs? We've really worked hard to broaden our network of co-investors with corporate venture groups. You may know now, Matt, the list includes Intel, Zoom, Qualcomm, Applied Materials, Baidu, Yamaha, SK, and a bunch of others that have now invested more than $500 million into portfolio companies where we were the seed source of capital. So we're quite proud of the co-investment group that we've been able to bring together in support of our portfolio companies. And we've worked hard to do that because, in line with some of your comments earlier about Citi and the value beyond capital that you can provide, we're seeing accelerated growth within our portfolio companies when we get corporates involved. How are you engaging with seed and early stage VC firms, and how should they best engage with you?
Yeah, look, I think we've co-invested. Since we've been around now 13 years, we've co-invested with a lot of different funds, and we certainly welcome that collaboration with anybody. I think we've just been, I guess I would say, more targeted about, building those relationships, building those networks with those firms that are sort of upstream from us, if you will, that are doing earlier stage deals in areas that we think might be interesting. So getting to know like the cyber focused seed stage funds, getting to know the enterprise, more broadly enterprise focused seed stage funds, building relationships with those folks. I say doing it on a more frequent or a more regular basis, periodic basis versus ad hoc. So, I think just being intentional about building those relationships, I think has been important. I think, we may touch on it later, but I think like managing your time is the biggest challenge in this business. And so just trying to be very intentional about, who you spend time with and making sure it's funds that are focused on areas where that deal flow will be in your sweet spot.
All right, Matt, we're going to migrate to the rapid fire portion of the program, right? We're going to wrap things up with just a rapid fire Q&A.
Okay.
In addition to high performance computing, I'm also interested in high performance humans. And so my thesis project, when I graduated from the Coffin Fellows, was on strategic planning for life and how we could sort of establish sort of life routines to bring our A game at the office or in life. Can you talk a little bit about professional excellence and high performing investors in the corporate venture world? And, obviously you're at this extraordinary brand. You've had a successful career across 3 different corporate venture groups. What are some of the keys from a professional excellence standpoint in your view from in the corporate venture world?
Yeah, I think I'd say the biggest thing is being well connected to your corporate parent and being able to actually get things done within your corporate parent. Because if we're out there saying, hey, I can help you at Citi, that's the value add. And if Citi's expecting me to go find companies and then get those companies, hopefully Citi to become a customer, and that helps Citi's business, then I really need to understand Citi's business and the product roadmaps and the challenges in detail. So I think one is being well connected to, if you're a CVC, to your corporate partner, your mothership, your parent, if you will. I think that's really important. And knowing how to get stuff done in that environment. I think that's critical, because ultimately the startups that you're trying to court are going to look and say, oh yes, Matt and Citi invested in company XYZ, and now Citi is a customer of XYZ. That worked. And so, having those proof points, I think it will be important to walk the walk of the talk that you're talking, right? So I think that's important in terms of being a CVC. And then I'd say it's stuff that other investors, also do, which is, being connected, reading, listening to podcasts, newsletters, staying up to speed on market trends and dynamics, keeping your network fresh and up to date, building relationships with, this goes maybe a little bit outside of your corporate parent, but building relationships with other buyers, operators, and experts in the field in which you're investing, so that you have, a multiple points of perspective on, what's going on in that area and what are the exciting trends, what are the things I should be focused on. And when you meet a company, it's faster to diligence if you happen to know like 3 or 4 people that are already, that are customers of that company or POCing that product, and you can make 3 or 4 phone calls to, sort of quickly get a perspective as to what other people think. Because, at the end of the day, VCs are not buying the product, right? They're investing in a company that's selling the product to somebody else. And you really want to know from the person that would buy the product, what do they think? What is their perspective?
Well, one of the comments you made was around time management. I have to ask on the personal side, I'm finding that people professionally are very meticulous about how they manage their time, but when they sort of turn the lens to life, they're a little bit more reactive and a little less proactive. And I'm a big fan of sort of morning routines and trying to understand how people sort of launch into their day and balance sort of, sleep and health and family and relationships and work. Can you talk at all about sort of your morning routines, anything that you do to sort of kickstart your day to ensure sort of alignment and time management in line with your objectives?
Yeah, it's, I think it starts for me, like it just starts with the basics of being a human, which is you gotta sleep enough. And so, trying to make sure you get to bed at a reasonable time. And I'm kind of a morning person, so I get up pretty early. I exercise, I try to do some meditation. I usually have a list of the things I'm working on, so that can be top of mind, and I can think about that, review that the night before, and then think about it a bit in the morning. Because I often find, the problems you're trying to solve, you sometimes solve them, while you're sleeping, while you're in the shower, while you're on the treadmill, right? And so I think, having those things top of mind is important. So for me, it's those sort of basic routines, and I'm one of those people that like structure. So I think that structure is really important for me. Having that time in the morning to myself to exercise, meditate, and kind of prepare for the day is really important. I'd love to find time to chat further about this. Maybe we can grab half an hour just to talk about the work you did and the conclusions, and if there's anything I'm missing, because I'm big on trying to optimize my experience.
Yeah, happy to do that, particularly because I'd like to get your advice on how to solve my wife and my Netflix addiction for watching 2 episodes a night that keep you up later than you'd like. The only competitor to Netflix, I guess, is sleep, and so I'm losing that battle some nights. Last question for you, and then we'll wrap up and open it up to the Kaufman Fellows for questions during the second half of this program. Just professional blogs, podcasts, publications. You've got a favorite or one or two that you'd mention that you listen or read pretty meticulously?
Yeah, hard to pick one, so I'll rattle off a bunch real quickly. But yeah, so much good stuff out there. I think Invest Like the Best, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, great podcast. I think most people probably know 20-Minute VC with Harry Stebbings, great. Lex Friedman, I've been listening to a lot of his stuff. He's just had so many great guests on recently. So it's a combination of industry specific and investment content. And then in terms of reading, I think it's the normal stuff like Axios Pro Rata by Dan Frymack, Connie at Strictly VC, John Lear and Jessica Lynch. They do a great enterprise workbench weekly to get an update on enterprise deals and news. And then Ed Sim at Boldstart does something called What's Hot in IT. That's really good every week.
Matt, thanks so much for spending a little bit of time with us today. I really appreciate the candid insight on the industry and on some of the things that you've navigated through professionally and personally, and sort of highlighting some of the focus of Citi. That was particularly valuable for me and the group today. Thanks so much for spending time with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks again for inviting me to be part of it, and excited for future interactions.